Hello, welcome back. It's been a few weeks, not lockdown, but it's an uncertain time for everybody, including this show at the moment. So welcome all on Sheffield Live TV. We're wondering how best to do it in the future. At some stage, we'll return to a studio, I am sure. But meantime, we've got a sort of one-off show, and it's really to recap the football season, a very dramatic and eventful one, and to look into the future, which could be an exciting one and indeed an eventful one for different reasons. I'm delighted to welcome former star players from both Sheffield football clubs to our virtual studio. Brian Deane, the former Sheffield United and, dare I say it, Leeds United striker, breaking into a break in Whitby at the moment. Brian, it's good to see you. You couldn't have picked a better staycation venue, I've got to say.
Yeah, it's gorgeous up here, really is. And I'm not really somebody who kind of holidays around the UK, but obviously with everything that's going on, it's made us all rethink as to, how we spend our time.
You couldn't have picked
no, it's beautiful.
And I'm sure it's a favourite of Chris Turner as well, the former Sheffield Wednesday player, goalkeeper, and the former Sheffield Wednesday manager as well. He's very well qualified to talk on current events. Chris, how are you? How are you keeping?
Good afternoon, Alan. Very good, thank you. You're quite correct. Whitby, if you come from Yorkshire, it's one of the best places to go and spend your time. Robin Hood's Bay just round the corner. Lovely place. Been there many a time.
I think we're all rediscovering just how attractive our own country is.
I think the farce of the flights to Tenerife and Ibiza, Mallorca and Spain, I think it's welcome for the English Tourist Board at this present time to fill up all the houses and guest houses and hotels in the UK.
Yeah, it's good to be home. Brian, it's been a great season for two of your former clubs, hasn't it? I mean, you must have enjoyed it immensely.
Yeah, it's been, like you say, Sheffield United have been fantastic all year. Just a continuation, really, of what they've done over the last few years. I don't think it really came as that much of a surprise to me personally. I know that I was listening to some of the pundits at the beginning of the season saying that they expected Sheffield United to park the bus and, they expected them to kind of struggle. And I really thought, well, it's a really unscientific view. And unless you've seen the team and you've seen the kind of problems that they cause for teams just by the way they set up, it's really quite an ignorant view. And we found that out, because the way they play, they have a very strong back line, and then they look to overload the midfield area, and it's worked really well. I think what you get when you're in the Premier League is you get a lot of teams who try and mimic the likes of the Manchester Cities and so on in terms of how they set up, and then the phases of play are quite kind of generic, and what that means is that when they have a new problem, they don't know how to deal with that solution, and I think that's what's happened this year with Sheffield United. I think that obviously next season's going to be tougher because people will be able to have more of a reference as to how to deal with some of the problems that the formation and the personnel cause. But I think that means that, hopefully we'll see the formation and the way how they play evolving again. And I think in management, you have to stay one step ahead of things and perhaps change things up. Otherwise, people get used to what you're doing. With regards Leeds United, I mean, obviously they've been very strong all year. They've got a very good head coach. And I'm one of those who believes that the lockdown and the games behind closed doors has helped the team in many ways, because the atmosphere and the crowd at Leeds United is very intense. And but getting to the end of the season, when they get nervous, sometimes it kind of transfers onto the players. So not having that on their backs, I think, has been beneficial for Leeds, and they've got over the line this time, which is like you say, it's fantastic for the region. It's fantastic for them as a club as well.
Yeah, I'll progress that with you. Great thoughts from Brian on where Leeds and Sheffield United go next in terms of style of play and what we can expect next season. But interesting that you felt Leeds at the end of the season critically there were maybe helped by having an empty ground. Sheffield Wednesday certainly weren't, Chris Turner. The form continued pretty much as before, and now a 12-point penalty to start next season. I've been looking at some of your tweets, and you're a long-standing Al. You were very emotional on Twitter the other night about the whole thing.
Yes, Alan, I think we've spoken privately over the last 18 months, and certainly since last November when the problems started to arise off the pitch. And, I think, just listening there to Brian, he's talking about two great clubs as well as Sheffield. I'm talking about Sheffield Wednesday. Those two clubs are on the crest of a high, and Sheffield Wednesday currently on the crest of a slump. And it is depressing. I think the last few months of the season, nobody's known what is going to happen with the EFL case. But I think deep down, anybody that knows anything about football, we're expecting a points deduction. And it came. I think there is a financial implication along with it. I'm pleased that relegation wasn't forthcoming immediately, but it does mean next season minus 12, and you can look at it and think, well, you can regain 12 points, which you can over the season, but it's all ifs and buts. If it's a great start, yeah, it can be easily overcome. But if it's not if it's an indifferent start or a slow start, it then becomes a noose around the team players' confidence, and it then becomes a difficult situation. And from a fan's point of view, it's negativity before the season starts. And we want to be up there with Sheffield United and Leeds United of this world. And at the moment, you can't see that happening for at least another 2 seasons. But I think a lot of things in and around the club for that to happen must change.
Okay, we'll come to what must change in your view a little bit later. Brian, have you any thoughts just looking across the way? I mean, the only real Sheffield Wednesday connection you have is having played against them a few times, having scored against them, and nearly, on one occasion, signing for them, or perhaps not so nearly. They made a bid. Have you any thoughts on it?
No,
yeah, I mean, no, listen, I'm not one of those guys who kind of will be here kind of with a fist pumping at the situation at Sheffield Wednesday. It's just not how I am. I actually hope that they come through this, and I think a strong Yorkshire is good for the region anyway. But it seems to me that there's a disconnect, and I don't really follow it, but it just seems that there isn't much kind of cohesiveness at the club, whether it's the way how the club is run, the communication with the owners, and I think that sometimes what happens with owners, and I'm not sure if this is the case, but sometimes with owners, if you have a lot of money, you automatically assume that you understand football. Football's different to any other sport, believe me. And you need people at the club who understand the game. You need people who understand that particular club. And, you need to have a structure in place to make sure, in my opinion, that most of the departments are club owned. You don't kind of bring somebody in and allow them to kind of put their people in every position, because there has to be continuity. And if you haven't got that, then you rip out the soul of the club every 18 months, 2 years when they change the manager. So perhaps that's a start. But yeah, it's a sad for me to see Sheffield Wednesday. What do? Do they start a pre-season training and look to kind of win those points back straight away? If they do that and they don't, what kind of state of fitness are the players going to be in? You know, are they engaging with the fans? Are they kind of creating a siege mentality? I don't know, but these are all things that they have to get right. You know, they have to find a way of getting the fans behind the club and everybody swimming in the same direction for me.
Do you know, a few years ago, Leeds were docked 15 points. I think they were in League One at the time, and they made a storming push for the playoffs. I think Dennis Wise was in charge then. So that siege mentality can be a force, can it not, for Sheffield Wednesday next season? What do you think, guys?
Totally agree. After you, Chris.
Well, I totally agree, but a siege mentality has to be built on by everybody pulling in the same direction. And a siege mentality is formed by having a great team spirit, a great willingness to work hard on the pitch, hard off the pitch. And as I say, and Brian said, is everybody pulling in the right direction. At Sheffield Wednesday, they are not pulling in the right direction. Gary Monk said before in one of his interviews, and you can deem that all the managers have been handcuffed to a degree in what they're saying in the press conferences. But he did mention there's deep-rooted problems within the club, and you can make your own mind up about what he's talking about. But from my personal point of view, the manager has to sit there in the club and make all the major decisions on the team, all the major decisions on the players coming in, all the major decisions on anything to do with football. And if you have that, then a siege mentality can be formed. But as we all know, that hasn't been the case over the last 3 to 4 years with Carlos, with Jos, even a little bit with Steve Bruce, and now Gary Monk. And that's where the problem lies. And the infrastructure off the field, you know, one man's making all the decisions and one man's created the problems that we are presently are in. Nobody can hide from that fact. The only way I can see it going well is if we can get that togetherness, but it's got to be a big step forward from everybody.
Yeah, just taking Brian's point from earlier about people coming into football with a lot of money doesn't mean to say that they're the best people to make football decisions, because it's different for those who are steeped in the game for life, Brian.
Yeah, and look, it happens all the time. But like I said, you know, and when I talk about the culture, you have to talk about people who understand what's happening in Sheffield. If you look at Sheffield United, slightly different model, but you have to look at what Sheffield Wednesday means to the fans, and you need to follow it. You know, do we play this way? You know, you need somebody to coordinate all of that, and that's when you get. That's when if an owner really understands and wants to wants to make successful a go of it at a club like Sheffield Wednesday, he has to have the right people around it, and he has to be able to take advice from these people, and those people are people who understand football. You can't make decisions on a whim. Football's just not like that. It'll bite you, and it'll bite you hard. And we're seeing that with Sheffield Wednesday now, huge club, but it's just, you know, it's like whichever the way wind is blowing, that's the way they seem to be carrying on at the moment. And it's sad to see, because there's been so much success over at Sheffield United, and I've really enjoyed going down there for the last 3-4 years, knowing that the club is playing a certain type of football. You know, Saturday night, everybody's going home happy, you know, and contrasting that to how the fans at Sheffield Wednesday are going home, it's quite sad. But, you know, until you get a proper infrastructure in place, like Chris said, you know, that's going to continue, because, you know, you need to understand football to understand the problems.
And also worth pointing out that, you know, you don't necessarily need an awful lot of money to get out of the Championship. Brentford have come pretty close on sort of a minus budget, having sold promising players as part of their model. Sheffield United came out of it having spent relatively little. And you could say, Brian, the same about Leeds, apart from the huge investment in Marcelo Bielsa, which is handsomely paid off. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, when I looked at Bielsa coming in, I think what happens is, I looked at how the players were, that same group of players. I remember going into a restaurant in Leeds and talking to some of the, over the course of about 25 years, you get to know all the Italian waiters. So, they're saying, we had all the players in here and they were, I think they'd lost to Preston, and then he said, they were out and they were getting drunk and so on. And then, and that's leadership. That's a lack of leadership, allowing that. And then you brought in Bielsa, and straight away, players know they can't get away with that. They become accountable straight away. And the mentality now is, okay, we're on trial, every one of us, for every minute of the day. This is a very experienced coach, and things you might have been able to get away with a less experienced coach, you just can't get it, because the fans will take the side of, somebody coming in with that kind of resume. And it's come to pass. They've been brilliant. I think at times they've, from what I've heard, they have a very small squad, a very focused squad. I'm not sure whether or not that's going to work in the top division, because, one thing you get in the top division is teams will study your weaknesses, and they'll try and exploit those weaknesses. They have to spend a lot of money as well, for example. So they have to make sure that they bring quality in with their recruitment. But I think he's the right guy. I think everybody in Leeds loves him. And like you say, the town, the city is absolutely buzzing now. So yeah, long may it continue.
And as well, just turning to you, Chris, interesting to compare the culture that exists within Leeds United, within the dressing room, and certainly within Sheffield United and the players there, with the culture that Gary Monk has identified as being, soft at Sheffield Wednesday.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound depressive about the club, because I'm usually a very positive person about the club, but you can't have a dressing room with 5 or 6 of what you would say the better players in the squad, and 5 or 6 of them not been playing for the last 2 seasons on a consistent basis, and hide behind the fact that they are available for selection, but they're not being selected. We've got 2 great young goalkeepers in Wildsmith and Dawson, who hopefully at least one of them can, in the next 18 months, break really through and make a career as number 1 at Wednesday. But we've also got the best goalkeeper in the Championship in that dressing room, and he's not playing. And when you have players of that ilk, and Hutchinson, and 1 or 2 others who are not being selected, that does not breed a good dressing room. And that then transpires onto the terraces, where the fans are wanting to see player A, B and C in the team, and when they're not being selected. When Jos was manager, I'm not saying I was a Jos fan, but those players never played, and then suddenly Lee Bullen was made caretaker manager, and within 24 hours, 3 or 4 of them boys are back in the team, and we go on a 3 or 4 game unbeaten run, 3 wins and a draw, and start to sniff a little bit of playoffs again. And then since that's happened, again, those players have been missing this past season again at times. And it does not breed stability. Now, if you don't want those players at the club, pay them up and pay them up to leave and move them on. Or in the window, get rid of them. If they're not the right people for your club, move them on. Don't keep them there, which then angers the fans because they're there and they're not playing, and angers the players around them when they're looking around the dressing room, when on the training pitch. I mean, Hutchinson, for me, who when he's playing, brings a big part to the side. He's training with the youth team and stuff like that. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. Get your best players, build a squad, and get them going. And that's what's been wrong for me in the last 12 months and beyond.
Who do you blame for that? I mean, there's not been movement out, but Gary Monk has made a particular point, and I suppose he's identified the same players as Jos Luhukay did in terms of marginalising them for rightly or wrongly, possibly wrongly. But do you think Gary Monk should have just basically kept all that together, or do you think he's been right in looking to say, look, we need a younger, hungrier squad?
I think that's pretty evident that we need that. But you know, there've been 2 or 3 windows since Joss Luque left. And if there has been a problem, is the problem that when these managers are wanting to release these players or move them on, that the chairman's not allowing them to do that? That's another rumour that's pretty strong in and around the place. There's all these rumours and nobody comes out and tells any truth. And that's why these rumours keep coming round. And you have to look at the situation and say, it looks pretty true to me and the vibes that's coming.
Okay, there's a lot to sort out there, a lot more to discuss, and a lot more as well in terms of the way the Blades and Leeds approach next season with very, very different challenges. Brian and Chris, thanks very much indeed. And I hope you at home can rejoin us in just a couple of minutes for part 2. See you then.